Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our February town hall. It's really exciting to have this opportunity to check in, take your questions, and give you updates on some of the things that we've been working on in Congress. I know that many of us would love to have the opportunity to do this in person, but we're going to continue to do a little bit more virtual town halls until the weather permits for us to be able to do them outside, or there is safe measures that can be taken in order for us to do it indoors while COVID rages on. So let's get to some updates real quick. Do you have the next slide?
Yep, I have. Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all again for your patience, for joining us. I know that this has been a really hard time in our community. We are still dealing with yet another killing of an innocent young man in the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department. Amir Lak should be with us, and he and his family and our community didn't deserve what happened to him. And so we still continue to address the issues of police brutality. As many of you know, we introduced and passed now twice the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which is a very comprehensive piece of legislation that increases accountability for law enforcement misconduct. It restricts certain use of police practices. It enhances transparency and data collection, and it helps establish best practices and trainings. After Dante Wright was killed by the Brooklyn Center Police, we also introduced a slew of legislation to address some of the things that we thought might have prevented his death and the death of so many others in our community. We introduced legislation to address the kind of data collection that we thought should be available that allows for cross agencies to share the information. We introduced legislation to create a national police misuse of force investigation board, so that police misuse of force wasn't just a one-off investigation, but there was a board that would retroactively and instinctively investigate these killings that occur in the hands of police. We also, because of the uprisings in the summer of 2020, we introduced legislation to make sure that protesters weren't being criminalized. Our legislation was called Criminalizing Police Violence Against Protesters bill, to make sure that there was accountability for law enforcement and local police departments when they brutalized and violently reacted to legal protests that were taking place within our communities. We also introduced the Global Police Brutality Resolution, which was a resolution to recognize that police brutality doesn't just happen in the United States, but it's happening globally against people who are out and fighting for their rights. We believe that dissent is to be patriotic, and it is necessary for us to make sure that we are fighting against the forces that are stopping people from exercising their First Amendment rights, not just here in the United States, but globally as well. And right after Amir Locke was killed in Minneapolis, we've been in conversations with his family, with the judiciary committees, both in the House and in the Senate, to work on legislation to ban no-knock warrants. We are hoping to introduce this piece of legislation in the next few days, and look forward to giving you all updates on what it will ultimately encompass, and how everybody, not just in our district, but across the country, can help us push to make sure this legislation becomes law. We also know that it's not just police brutality that we have to fight against in order to keep our community safe, but we also have to do everything that we can to keep the public safe. And as many of you know, crime is rampant in our community. There are a lot of young people, innocent people who are losing their lives in the hands of criminals in our communities. And so it's really important that we have a holistic conversation about what it means to keep every single one safe. I recently, on Saturday, attended a healing circle that was happening at North High School in North Minneapolis, where the former classmates, community members, and the parents of the young man who was killed, Deshaun Hill, were gathered. And this was a really tragic death, and a really traumatizing event for just not just the young people in our community, but every single person. As a mother of a son closer to D Hill's age, it was very personal for me. And I know everyone has been asking, what we can do, and how community can collectively respond to this tragic death. We've been in conversations, not just in community, but with local leaders in our community, especially with the mayor and others, to try to figure out ways to stop the kind of crime that's happening in our communities, whether it is the homicide cases that continue to pile up, whether it is the carjackings that are making our communities feel unsafe. And I think that solutions rest with community. And so when we were at this healing space, there were so many people in the community that were talking about what they want to see. And a lot of the conversations that we had were about ways in which community can show up for one another. So there were a lot of people urging for folks to speak up, so that the Minneapolis Police Department has the tools and the resources that they need in order to actually solve some of these cases and take these criminals off our streets, so that they are not taking another beloved child of a mother or a father. We also had a lot of conversations about what it looks like for us to invest in violence prevention programs. Few weeks ago, few months ago, I was able to go to North Memorial Hospital, where they were showcasing a program that the city and the county has partnered on together, called Next Step Program, where they are dealing with folks who experience gun violence, and dealing not just with the individuals that survive, but also with the community as a whole, to make sure that they're addressing the trauma that the community is experiencing. Because research shows that if we don't deal with the trauma, it is more likely that those who are traumatized themselves will either get victimized or will victimize. And so it's really important that we have this sort of holistic approach to making sure that community is healed, so that we can address the violence that people are experiencing and the trauma that they're dealing with. In the Build Back Better legislation that we have been fighting for in Congress, and I hope that when there is a passage of something like the Build Back Better, that we are able to continue to push, because we had $500 million in crime prevention programs like Next Step, that can be invested in, that will go a long way in addressing the kind of community violence that we have seen, that not just is happening in Minneapolis in our district, but it's happening across the country. I do know that in the American Rescue Plan that we passed early last year, there are resources that our city and our county received in the form of actual dollars that they can use to engage in crime prevention programs. And I do hope that the mayor decides to invest some of those dollars in expanding programs like Next Step, because we know that crime prevention works. And as our community steps up to provide information as witnesses and such, that many of these unsolved cases will be solved, and that our community can be made whole once the kind of crime that we are experiencing subsides. Um, On to some good news. On Wednesday of last week, I was able to be in the district with First Lady Dr. Jill Biden to celebrate Minnesota being one of the first states to utilize the child care funds that were released in the American Build Back, the American Rescue Plan. As many of you know, we fought for resources to make sure that childcare centers would be able to open back up safely, that folks who work in our childcare centers would have the dignified wages that they deserve in order to continue to work and serve our children and our communities. We also had resources in there to help parents pay for childcare expenses and offset some of the high costs that are associated with childcare in our state. And so the Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Peggy Flanagan invested those resources and made sure to set up sustainable grant funds to these facilities and to parents to be able to utilize those funds. And it was really a wonderful event at the University of Minnesota to both hear from parents who've received these funds and to hear both from centers who have been able to sustain their center and workforce, and to hear from individuals who are now able to get paid a decent wage in order to continue to care for our children. Childcare is one of the anxieties that many working parents deal with. I myself, as a parent of 4 children, understand what it looks like to deal with the cost of childcare. And it is really important that we are continuing to work to have the resources available to our constituents and the people of Minnesota and this country to be able to pay for childcare and continue to participate in our economy, and be part of our community as well. Now, I wanted to give you guys a little update on the situation in Afghanistan with the Afghan resettlement program that we've been working on and giving you updates on since the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Last year, the US military undertook a very historic evacuation where we evacuated nearly 130,000 people from Afghanistan. In the last few months, there was a similarly historic effort undertaken by local communities to welcome the Afghan refugees. In Minnesota, we are proud to be participants as we have engaged with our resettlement agencies to resettle so many deserving Afghan refugees into our communities. I also want to thank the Minnesota National Guard, who's been leading a resettlement effort for Afghan refugees in New Mexico. I recently got to talk to some of the generals who are doing that work, and the chaplain and imam, who is a young Muslim woman, and talk to them about the work that they are doing and tell them how proud we are of the efforts that they undertook and how we are excited to continue to build community with our new neighbors as Afghan refugees get resettled and get acclimated into life, not just here in the United States, but in Minnesota and certainly in Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. As a former refugee, someone who was resettled by some of these resettlement agencies in Minnesota, I know how important it is, the work that they do. I also know how important it is for community to show up and to build community around you, and how easy that process can be made for refugees when community puts their arms around one another. I always say in Minnesota, we are a cold state, but the people have warm hearts. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the generosity of our neighbors in Minnesota who educated and acclimated myself and my family into our community. So again, thank you to everyone who's participating in these programs, who's doing their part, whether it's in their churches, in their mosques, in their synagogues, or in their temples, to welcome and create a community around these Afghan refugees who have been through a lot. We also know that with the evacuation program that there's still some challenges. So we are still working with the State Department to bring back some Americans that are still in Afghanistan. There continues to be challenges faced in working with the administration and trying to get some of our residents who are in Afghanistan to come back home. We will continue to do that work and look forward to hopefully closing this chapter as every single American is brought home from Afghanistan and is brought to safety so that they can be with their families. And we will continue to engage in the efforts of getting everyone out who has been part of our mission there as well, who is facing danger because of the work that they did to help our servicemen and women as they have been engaged in work in the last 20 years in Afghanistan. So today we learned the news that the new maps are out for congressional districts. In Minnesota, I know that some of the local representatives, whether it's your House representative or your senator, that some of the border lines have shifted, and we will work closely with them to make sure that there is a continuum of representation. As the 5th was is kept mostly intact. We will continue to represent the same people that we have represented in the fifth. We haven't gained new constituency. We are disappointed and saddened to have lost some constituents to other districts, and we hope that they will be in good hands with their new members. With their new representation in Congress. We are losing the city of Hopkins that will no longer be part of Minnesota's 5th district. And we are also losing some parts of Edina that we used to previously represent, and that was previously part of Minnesota's 5th congressional district. This map is drafted by an independent group, and it is probably one of the least gerrymandered district in the country, which we are proud of. And we love having the opportunity to say that out loud, to know that our district has lines that really are of communities that belong together and are not partisan or created to make sure there's a particular representation. And so thank you so much for everyone who's worked on this, to our constituents who've sent in testimonies to make sure that our district and our constituents all stayed together. So as we continue to provide constituent services to our community, as many of you know, we work on constituent caseloads around immigration. We work on IRS issues. We work on getting access around healthcare. We do work around Social Security. So there's a slew of agencies that we liaison on behalf of our constituent. If there's a federal agency that you need work done with, our office is there to liaison on your behalf and make sure that your case is being resolved in a speedy manner. We also do a lot of veteran work. So if you are a veteran, don't hesitate to reach out to our office so that we can provide adequate service to you. But what we are seeing is that there is right now a lot of backlog in several of the federal agencies, particularly with immigration and tax issues. And so we are asking people to reach out to our office to see what we can do to expedite some of the work that might be needed from the IRS or any immigration agency. And we look forward to engaging with you in that regard. The information is there. You can go to our website, omar.house.gov. You can reach us at 612-333-1272, or you can email us at mn05.info@mail.house.gov. So whichever mode is simple for you to contact our office, please utilize that. Our office is your office, and we are here to make sure that you are connected and serviced by any federal agency that you might need. And with that, we are going to pause and take some of your questions. I just want to thank everyone who submitted questions and look forward to chatting with you all.
So we got some great questions ahead of time that were pre-submitted with people registered. So when we call your name, I'll promote you to a panelist, and then you can turn your video on. I'll unmute you and you can ask your question on camera. And with that, the first one we have is Carla Hildonish, who had a question about student loans. Carla, are you there? Then we can go to the next person, which is Anne.
Hello.
Great, looks like we've got Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi. Yeah, the question that I sent in was regarding training in the trades. We're currently experiencing a tremendous dearth in trained folks to handle the construction trades and other professions in that regard. And we're just wondering if there are any plans afoot or any discussion going on as to any kind of training being funded by the government for these folks who need to retrain into new careers and need to fill all these jobs that are woefully underfilled at this point between retirements and people just not entering the trades because we've created a college culture rather than a jobs culture in this country.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne, for your question. You're right. We must do everything that we can to make sure people are able to gain the kind of skills that they need in order to participate in our 21st century economy. So in the Build Back Better legislation, we had a lot of resources in workforce development programs. We were investing $40 billion in some of those programs in the higher ed portion of that Build Back Better legislation. And I can assure you that whatever we ultimately end up passing as part of a reconciliation package, that will be part of it as well. We also put $20 billion in the Civilian Climate Corps to create high quality service and job opportunities to make sure that community members were able to do work in regards to fighting against climate change. As you know, I sit on the Education and Labor Committee, and so this is a particular focus for me and the committee. I also serve on the Workforce Development Subcommittee, and so there's a lot of things that we are doing. And when we do the higher ed reauthorization legislation, there is going to be lots of proposals to help make sure that there is particular investments in the trades. I recently visited Minneapolis Community College, and we went to go see a lot of the trades training programs that MCTC is providing. And we continue to partner with them to make sure that they have the resources and that they're doing proper outreach in community to make sure people know about these programs and can come in and get their training. A lot of those programs are 1-year certificate sort of training, and they can either go into apprenticeships or are getting hired directly by some unions as well.
And our next question is from Philip, who had a question about sanctions.
Are we allowing people to come on with their camera on?
Mute.
Yep.
Start my video.
Philip, can you turn your camera on? Oh, there you go.
Hi. Thanks for entertaining the question and talking to us. It's always a helpful thing. The first question that I had was you mentioned in a newsletter about the sanctions for Somalia that apparently are in place and that you don't feel are helpful. Which ones are they, and how would changing them make a difference?
That's actually a good question, which is what we were asking. The sanctions that are so what we've been doing is sort of looking at all of the sanctions that are currently placed on different countries and trying to see if some of the sanctions actually are like outline who's being sanctioned, what the sanctions are for, if there's information available to the countries on how they get themselves of being sanctioned. And we noticed that some of these countries, there is no clarity. We've imposed sanctions, but there is no particular language on file with these sanctions that say if you do A, B, and C, you will not be sanctioned anymore. So Somalia was one of those countries. We've also worked with Cambodia and Laos on some visa sanctions that were there that just got lifted. So the letter that we sent was basically asking the questions that you just asked. What are these sanctions for? Which were imposed on 2010 and 12. And then we asked what the utility for the sanctions are. Do we have a sanctions policy for Somalia? And are the individuals that are even sanctioned part of government anymore? Because we know that there hasn't been the same administration in Somalia for the last 2 cycles.
Yes. Now, I don't know if it's okay to have a follow-up question. The other was a little more a general question, and that is, what kind of a voice can we have, or do you have, or what is your point of view on having a voice to counter? Well, and I think it's probably, I'm kind of partial to certain ways of thinking about things, but things like these rules for state legislatures that seem to be anti-voting, anti-education, certainly with the pandemic, the vaccine, the masking, the things that some of us, I'm a physician, and so I kind of try to think these things through a little bit and have studied about them, that really could help us and save some lives and really help us. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so in regards to the voting, we've obviously proposed a slew of federal election policies that we think would counter. We're seeing some challenges, and so the way that the administration is working to counter that is by putting resources within the courts to try to make sure that there's challenges to some of these policies in regards to their constitutionality. I also know that there are a lot of people, who are running for school board and such to try to implement some of these policies. So I would suggest countering that would be to also have people who run for local offices that do not want to ban the teaching of history and proper history, or don't want to ban, books that we've all have it be part of our education system. I recently heard there was a state where they were banning To Kill a Mockingbird. and I remember reading it. I'm sure you remember reading it.
Of course.
Right. And so, you know, it's one of those books that like it's an intro into understanding a lot of our history, especially the history of the South. And so there are pieces that are really important, I think, for our young people to learn and be part of, that people are objecting. I also think it's kind of fascinating to I don't want to be too partisan, because this is an official town hall, but we've heard, you know, the Republicans for so long say, you know, facts don't care about your feelings, that, you know, liberals are triggered, that they want to drink liberal tears and all of this. And now they're creating legislation that basically stops people from creating discomfort for them, which is fascinating to me. And I think it's really important that the American people wake up to what these policies and advocacies are ultimately trying to do. They're trying to whitewash American history. They're trying to make sure, you know, not all of our kids have the ability to learn proper American history, and they are trying to scare people and turn us against one another. And, you know, we have to do everything that we can to stop them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Next, we have Rahul with a question about Medicare for all. Rahul, are you there? Can you turn your camera on?
Yep, we are here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So my name is Rahul Bhakta. I have with me Alicia Marfio and Khalil Permenter. We are students at Northwestern here from the Student American Black Chiropractic Association. And we wanted to talk about HR 2654 with you. I'll let Alicia take it away here.
Hello. So the American Chiropractic Association has proposed Bill HR 2654, also known as the Chiropractic Medicare Coverage Modernization Act. And this bill would allow Medicare beneficiaries to access the chiropractic profession's broad-based non-drug approach to pain management, which includes manipulation of the spine, evaluation of management services, diagnostic imaging, and this has become an important strategy in national efforts to stem the epidemic of prescription opioid overuse and abuse. In addition, the answers to these questions go beyond any academic debate about how good chiropractic care is estimated. Estimates suggest that low back pain costs up to $200 billion a year in the US. So essentially, we are asking for support for this bill. Yeah.
That's pretty much what we're looking for. Is we've been trying to get this bill pushed through Congress for a little while now, and your support from your district would be much appreciated, and I'm sure the people in your district would appreciate it a lot too. Just because a lot of people are suffering from low back pain, all your normal blue-collar workers who are doing a lot of the labor that keeps the city running. And we're just trying to provide them services. One of the things that this would do is provide them with something like a copay. Like right now, Medicare doesn't cover a copay for chiropractic services, but it covers it for PT, physical therapy, a lot of different doctor visits. And we would like to be under that same umbrella so we can better assist the community as well.
Yeah, this is a passion for us as we are students. We're future doctors. This is the future of healthcare that you're looking at. And so we are hoping to be included under the umbrella of medical professionals. So yeah, any last remarks that you'd like to make or anything?
Have you heard of the bill before? Has anybody brought it to your attention before?
It does sound familiar, and I'm actually not sure if I'm not already not signed on the legislation. I will take a look. I do actually thank you all for taking the time to come and advocate for a piece of legislation that doesn't often happen at our town halls. So it's pretty exciting to hear people talk about particular legislation they want to support. So we will take a look at it and reach out to you to connect.
Wonderful. Thank you so
you.
much for your time.
Of course. Good luck with school.
Thank you.
All right, next we've got Lloyd Williams, who had a question about housing.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the group. Frankly, I wasn't prepared to speak with the entire group, but I nevertheless, I hope you can put up with me. My original note was related to the impact that new pricing and revenue strategies of rental property owners and property owners are having on senior citizens. I'm now a senior citizen, and I've got a whole new appreciation for living on fixed incomes, et cetera. Specifically, for example, in the complex that I'm living in Golden Valley, the residents, many of whom have been here for many years, are now not only facing significant increases in rent, but also they're now being charged for the utilities over and above what they're incurring on their own unit. For example, they'll now be charged for the electrical systems that are going to be operating the lights, throughout the property, lighting, public space utilities, et cetera, et cetera. And even things like month to month leases are going to be increased $700 a month, which is a significant number. It's a significant number for seniors as it would be for somebody 35 years old. Those are big hits. What we're not understanding and what we're not getting a lot of help on or guidance on is that, are they allowed to do this? Can they continue to do this? We've got an awful lot of people who have lived in the same setting for a number of years. And frankly, people who are in their late 70s and 80 years old, they're trapped. They feel trapped. And frankly, I'm beginning to feel the same way. I'm not in my 70s or 80s right now, but you live for those people around you. They're beautiful people. And I can't imagine that this is the only place that's happening. And I'm wondering, where would you recommend and how could we get some more support for these folks? That it's happening all over the district, I'm sure. And I'll leave it to your response. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. I do think that no matter how much money we put into the system for affordable housing, especially for seniors, these kind of unregulated actions that you speak of will continue to exist. And I do want to have a more in-depth conversation with you so that we can strategize ways that we can tackle this issue. I think that there is a space for local municipalities to do some work, and I would love to explore some of those things with you. So Lloyd, if you are okay with somebody from my office reaching out to you for you and I to have a chat, I would love for that to happen.
I'd be more than happy, and I appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Of course, thank you.
Next we have Alpana.
Hi, Congresswoman. I think you are remembering my face. Remember? We did. Yeah. So I am doing for Joe Biden from the last 4 years. This is the 5th year, organizing nationally. And I'm concerned about the crime protection that have been provided to you. Is it only for Minnesota or it is for the United States that people who are working can give a messaging through protection policy as well as awareness through organizing, if that can be a possibility, or if it is just action oriented on those things that you provide that?
No, the crime prevention resources are national, so but they would have to be triggered by municipalities in creating the request and giving out the funds in collaboration with community efforts.
Yeah, so like independently, it is we cannot get it right because we really need to really communicate and have a group of people, experts, that what we are already doing. Build back better. We are doing infrastructure bill. We are already doing nationally. So if we get some grant kind of thing, then we can organize. We have connections. We can build people, bring in, and ask them to have a complete answer of what people want. That
Yeah,
would be
that's
good.
true. And we continue to fight for the flexibility for these resources. So we'll continue to do that work.
So in order to get that, I have to apply here in Washington.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with your state, so we can try to have somebody connect with you from our office to try to figure out where best to direct you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that child care funding that you provided extra,
Thank you.
Dr. Biden.
Next, we've got Jean or Alexis. If you could accept the panelist motion.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. So my concern is, while I'm a huge fan of the progressive agenda and Build Back Better and all of these lofty goals, I am really worried about letting the perfect get in the way of the good. And in particular, inter-party fighting and some of the battles that have happened in the last year so that nothing has gotten done. And then kind of along that same vein, what worries me is that the Democratic Party, particularly the Washington leadership, might be losing touch with the more centrist, moderate voters that we're really going to need to be able to defeat the completely crazy, irresponsible, corrupt Republican Party. And I'm just terrified to death that we could, lose the House, the Senate in 2022, and heaven forbid the White House. And to me, that is the number one priority, and everything else needs to trade off against that. So I'm really curious, what are your thoughts, and what are you willing to trade off? And, what you're willing to do to try to make a bigger tent and bring in more collaboration with independents and maybe even centrist-leaning Republicans who are reasonable people, reasonable voters and leaders. So that's my question, and thanks so much for taking it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very loaded question. I think that it's a question that we all ask ourselves, right? We just had a conversation with former President Obama and others as a caucus, and these are conversations we continue to have. Everybody has ideas. The reality is right now our biggest challenge is how do we get out there to talk about some of the things we've been able to accomplish in the last year since President Biden was elected, and this is why we had the First Lady come out to Minnesota so we can celebrate some of these real direct investments that we're making in people's lives, and this is why people like me within our caucus are committed to doing these monthly town halls so that people understand the kind of work that we're doing. We're engaging with constituents, and I think there's a lot of efforts out there to focus on the bickering, the divided, caucus, and all of these things. And I think, every caucus has that, right? Like even within the progressive caucus, we are not all ideologically aligned. And we are a family, and in a family, not everyone agrees. And I think our disagreements are often based on policy. Where should we go? What do we think is the best thing that we can do at the moment? And to what constituency would these things benefit? And I do believe that, these policies that we've been promoting and asking for, if you look at the polls, right, 70%, 80% have the support of the American people. Now, the challenge is, how do you get everybody to care about what these things mean, and how do we not waste a lot of time in explaining to the people how the sausage is made, but actually putting the sausage in front of them so that they can taste it and see if they like it. And so that's the challenge, because if you're spending a lot of time talking about process, once you ultimately get what you were after, the conversation is about what the fights were, and not what you ultimately accomplished, as we've seen with the infrastructure legislation or the Build Back Better legislation. Nobody's talking about what's in it, and how that could be beneficial to the American people, and why we so importantly fought for it, right? And so I just want to find the opportunities where we are actually talking about what we are doing, and how these policies that we've implemented and the ones that we continue to fight have a direct impact on people's lives. And that was the most joyful thing to do last Wednesday, was to sit with a young mother who was like, I almost quit school because I couldn't afford childcare. I couldn't go to work because I couldn't afford childcare. And here's someone now that's going to be an ambassador for that $500 million that was spent in investing in childcare in Minnesota, and is going to talk about it. And so those are the kind of stories that we have to make sure, so that we don't lose the narrative to, right, like the other party that is so disciplined in their messaging and in their narrative, regardless of how chaotic they are and how insane they are. They are disciplined in their message, and we just have to be disciplined as well.
I got it. Next, we have a question from Alexis, but it looks like she's having some audio issues. So Travis, are you able to join as a panelist?
I actually wanted to just say one more thing, in that I think part of the reason we're not breaking through is that these bills are so large that they're just too large to message, and breaking things into smaller bills. Even when Ilhan had earlier, you talked about the when Build Back Better gets, or something like that gets moved forward, then to put the public safety into that. And I actually think we'd be better off to do a public safety bill standalone and get that through with bipartisan support, because everyone cares about it right now. And then Democrats could brag about being on the side of fixing the problem, instead of being on the receiving end of the Republicans saying, oh, these Democrat-led cities are a big disaster and making everyone's lives unsafe. And then they create fear, and then they end up winning elections with that fear-based message. So anyway, that would be my thought for you to add to the many, many other ideas that I know you're considering. So again, Thank you for hearing my perspective.
No, that's actually a good perspective. And I wish it was one that we can actually implement, because there are no bipartisan anything that would be able to pass both the House and the Senate. And I know that there's a lot of people who are trying. We've been in negotiations for public safety pieces of legislation after the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act was passed. And after months of trying to negotiate, people had to, walk from the negotiating table. I know that Senator Cory Booker tried as hard as he could. And I know that Chairwoman Karen Bass tried as hard as she could to negotiate with Tim Scott. and it didn't happen. And so I think it's, in some of these issues, standalone bills don't have the chance, and that's why we're trying to do going through the route of reconciliation. And again, I'm doing the thing that I said nobody should do in explaining process, because you lose the narrative once you're doing that. But I think it's important for the public to understand that there is process restrictions in working with Republicans these days. Hi, Travis.
And we just got a couple minutes left, but we've got Travis.
I just wanted to ask what your plans were for student loan reform and forgiveness, as well as how you plan to convince President Biden, who seems to be a president who's been against any kind of forgiveness or student loan reform in general. And then I just had one request, which was, can we get more Teddy content? I feel like I don't see enough of him on your Twitter.
It's gonna come down the stairs now that you mentioned. Okay, I guarantee you there will be more Teddy content out there. So as you know, Travis, I'm the author of the student debt cancellation. So we continue to push for a cancellation of all student debt. I do believe that that's an important thing. But we have settled, right, for a $50,000, a request to the president to use his executive powers to cancel $50,000. And that's an effort led by me, Senator Warren, and Leader Schumer and Ayanna Pressley in the House. And we continue to push for that resolution to be passed and continue to pressure this administration. I tell you this, there hasn't been a single conversation we've had with anyone in the administration, including the president, because myself, Corey, and Ayanna had the opportunity to go to the White House not too long ago. We talked to him about it. There isn't an opportunity where we are in front of anyone in the administration when we are not bringing up student debt. And I know that my colleague and good friend, Alex recently talked about how that's going to be a game-changing thing in the midterm if he was able to actually follow through on this promise and cancel student debt in the midterms. That would make a big difference. So I know that people are frustrated, but we are doing everything that we can to create pressure to make sure that that gets done.
Thank you.
Travis, our last question would be from Sharon, if you can accept the panelist promotion. Otherwise, I think it is time to call it a day.
You can take one more.
Oh, there she is. Sharon, are you able to turn your camera on?
Not sure I know how to turn the camera on. I'm sorry. This is here, I see that now. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, is that working? Yeah, so I just moved recently from Germany, and I actually followed you closely because this is the district I'm from, and I'm very pleased to have you as my representative. But as somebody who's just moved from Europe, I'm just very concerned about the current activities in the Ukraine. And I know you are on the Foreign Service Committee group, and I was wondering what you thought the US should be doing in regards to what's happening as the potential war in Europe, and what your feeling is in particular about what the US can do if it has a role in trying to push against the growing authoritarianism. I know we have that at home, and that's not the question I'm asking, but abroad.
Where in Europe did you just move from? You're muted, so I didn't hear you. But I'm gonna.
I was in Munich, and in Germany for the last 20 years. So it's been a long time. I came back to a different country.
So, I mean, your question is, I think, a question that's been on the minds of many people, including myself. The president did a national address not too long ago today. I don't know if you were able to catch that. I caught a little bit of it because I was working from home. And what I think there are two things that are really important. One is that Ukraine and the Ukrainian president have been very clear in saying, we know what it will take for us to protect our sovereignty, right? And they've asked for two things. They've said, we want to make sure that the United States and our allies are going to be there to support us with the resources that we need. So it's going to be really important for us to make sure that we are providing resources to help them as they prepare for a possible defense. And the second thing that they have said is that they want the United States and allies to do everything that they can to de-escalate the situation and make sure that we are not taking any steps that would agitate the situation and accelerate any sort of Russian aggression and possible war. And I think those two things are really important. I know that the president of the United States, President Biden, has talked about how military intervention or military engagement with Russia is going to be devastating, and that would be the beginning of World War III, and that's not something that we're interested in. I do hope that our counterparts in Russia also get that, and that they understand that the response that they're going to have from the United States and our allies is not going to be kindly to them, and the kind of impact that it will have on Russia will also have a ripple effect on other countries as well. And so my hope is that we continue down this path of engaging in conversations that allow for Russia to de-escalate, and we continue to make sure Ukraine feels supported as they make decisions for themselves on how to move forward. In regards to authoritarianism and the growth of fascism, we have to continue to fight our battles here in the United States and show that as an example, right? If democracy is thriving here, we are able to sell our values and principles of uplifting democracies when we ourselves are not struggling within our own countries. We continue to engage with countries around Europe and around the world in these conversations and continue to provide resources for them that they can use to strengthen their democracy and fight against fascism. And those are a lot of the conversations that we're in daily as members of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I know other members of Congress, when they have an audience with embassies and foreign ministers, are engaged in that. But as I was just recently talking with parliament leader in Germany, we were having this similar conversation: what can be done and what is our collective responsibility as citizens of this world and people who actually understand the dangers of growth in fascism and authoritarianism, and what happens when strong men turn into dictators, and when divided societies reach the breaking point, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything to unify our country, strengthen our democracy, fight against the fringe groups that are trying to tear us apart, and then continue to send that message. Look, we have a thriving democracy, we have a thriving society. America is doing good, and here are things that you can do yourself. But if we're not strong here, our home base, it's hard to sell the message that others need to be strong as well. Thank you. Thank you for being here and welcome back.
Looks like that's all the time we have for tonight. Congresswoman, do you have any last remarks?
Yeah, I just want again to say, you know, we do these monthly town halls because we love having the opportunity to give you all updates, but more importantly, having you ask your questions directly so that we can answer them to you. We have from the beginning said that we are in the process of co-governing with our constituents. And this is a way for you all to keep us accountable and transparent and make sure that we continue to do the things that you're asking us to do, but also have the opportunity to explain and give our reasoning for the decisions that we are taking, the votes that we are taking, and the policies that we are pushing. So again, thank you so much for your partnership. Thank you for the honor to represent you in Congress, and look forward to seeing you all next month at our next town hall, whether in person or virtual. Good night, everyone.